Welcome back. Now we have looked at the basic selectors. We looked at the element selector where we talked about H1, H2 and H3. We looked at the class selector where we said it is preceded by a dot sign, and we looked at the ID selector, and this we describe as being preceded by the hashtag sign. Now let us look at a more complex selector. We have the group selector, the descendant selector and the pseudo class selector. Now these are a little more complex than the simple ones we looked at earlier. Now let's go back to where we left off in the previous exercise. We stopped somewhere here, except that I've taken away the background color here. Now if we recall from our previous exercise, this is H1, this is H2 and this is H3. Of course, these are our content region, and these are our sidebar, and this is our footer. Now let us assume that we want to give H2 the same styling as H1. We can see that the color of H1 here is red and it is very big. Now let us assume we want this to also apply to H2. How do we go about that? One option is to write the CSS from startup for H2. Another option is to use the first of our complex selector, which is the grouped selector. Now how does the group selector work? Let us see it in action. If we recall that we have already written out our CSS for the H1. Now what we want to do is to give this attribute of H1 to H2. In order to do that, if we go back to this, what we looked at earlier, we said in the group selector you separate each one with a comma. Like you can see, H1 is separated with a comma, H2 a comma and another element. Now let us do the same here. All we just need to do is, since we are giving H2 the same styling as H1, we'll go to the H1 CSS here, click it twice to make it editable, put a comma and type H2. And once you enter it, you notice that immediately your H2 takes on the form of H1. It takes on the styling of H1. Now that is what we call a grouped selector, and this is what a group selector does. There is no limit to the number of elements that you can put here. All you have to do is just separate each one by a comma and they all take the same styling. Now let us move on to the next type of complex selectors. The next type of complex selector is what we call a descendant selector. And how does this work? Let us look at the basic syntax. You first start with a hashtag, then the selector name and space another type of selector. You understand it when we see its application. Now let's come back here. Let us look at two instances where we use the descendant selector. First, let's assume that this our word here, information, is highlighted, it's bold. Let us assume our information, the word here is bold. As you can see, my word information is bold. Now if for instance I want everywhere I have this bold word, if I want it to be highlighted, then I can use what we call a descendant selector. Let's highlight another one and you see what we're talking of. Let's come down to this place and highlight this word elements. Let us make it bold. Now we have two bold words on our page. We have the word information and we also have the word element. How do we apply the descendant selector? It's easy. Come to the first bold word. Remember, our aim is to highlight each bold word and give it a background of yellow. Now we'll come to the first bold word, go to your CSS style, then your new CSS. Let's close this out. Now this box comes up. Dreamweaver assumes that you are dealing with a compound selector, and indeed we are dealing with a compound selector. Then in our selector type, we'll notice something here. It gives us that syntax it gives us that syntax for the descendant selector, only that it is a little more populated than what we saw earlier. Now what do we do here? Let's come to less specific, and you discover that your option is also streamlined. Now what this is telling us is that every word in paragraph, every strong word in paragraph will be affected by this change. I will click OK. When we click OK, now we need to define our CSS rule. We want to give it a font of, let's give it a font of Tahoma. Let's give it a font size of 14, a font style of italic. Then let's come down to the font weight and let's give it normal. If we choose bold, it's already highlighted in bold, so let's just give it normal. It will still be bold. Then let's come to the background, which is actually our aim. Let's give it a background of yellow that shows highlighting, and let's click apply. You discover that immediately that word is highlighted in yellow. And let's look at the second word. Oh, you will even have 3 words that are actually in bold. You see that the word standout is also highlighted in yellow, the word element is highlighted in yellow, and the word information. Now this is how you apply the descendant selector. Also, let us look at another way to apply the descendant selector. Let us apply it in terms of the list. When I say list, I mean these ones that you have right here. These are lists. This particular list is called an unordered list. Ordered lists are those lists where you have instead of bullet points, you have figures 1, 2, 3. Now, as we go on, you'll see the difference between an ordered list and an unordered list. One starts with a O, the other starts with a U. Don't get confused by it. Now, let us duplicate this list. Let's copy from here. Right click on it, copy it. Now let us duplicate it and make one ordered list, make the other an unordered list, and paste. Now we have 2 of it right now, and they are both unordered list. Let's copy this second one and go to our code view. In the code view, you see that we have a UL, which tells us it's unordered. Now let us change this second one, the UL, to OL. Here, let's change this U to O. That way we have converted it to ordered list. The U stands for unordered, while the O stands for ordered. Now let's come back to our design view. Now you can see the difference. Instead of the dotted points right now, we have the figures 1, 2, 3. Now this is unordered UL, while this is ordered OL. Now I want a situation where we want to apply the descendant selector to this ordered list. We want this ordered list and every other ordered list on this page to be italicized. Let's give it a unique style. Let's italicize it and maybe give it a color of brown. Okay, now let's highlight our ordered list, go back to our CSS style, click on new CSS. Then this comes up. The selector type is a compound selector like we've been doing before. Then the selector name is ordered. You can see OL here. Let's get a less specific option. Let's click this. It streamlines our options. It tells us that we are looking at ordered list of all these lists. The LI stands for list, then the OL stands for ordered list. Now this is exactly what we want to do. This ordered list affects all the ordered lists on this page. If we had gone to a less specific option, we would have just had LI list. This list will affect any kind of list on our page, whether ordered or unordered. So let's click on the more specific option and let's stop here. So we are looking at the ordered list on this page, and whatever we do now will affect only that. So let's click OK. Then our dialog box comes up. Let's give it a font family of, let's look for something different. This, our font weight, this is where you get to, okay, let's leave this. Let's look at the font style. This is where we get to italicize, and yeah, let's apply it and see what we have. Now you can see that your ordered list has changed while your unordered list remains the same. Now this is how you apply a descendant selector. Now let us look at the last type of selector that we have here, and that is the pseudo class selectors. Now I must say something here, that the pseudo class selector applies to links. When I say links, I mean, there are some words themselves that have been, that when you hover on them, you can actually click them and it takes you to another page. Those words are called links. Right now we don't have any on our page, but for the purpose of this exercise, let us create a link. Let us convert this word paragraph to a link. Let's highlight it, go to the HTML, come here and let us put an hashtag that converts it to a link. To verify this, let's save our work, go to this preview in browser and let's preview it in Firefox. Let's see what we have. And by the way, this is actually how to preview your work. I recommend that as you work a little, you preview in browser by coming to this browser arrow right here, clicking on it, then you choose whichever browser you want to preview. I recommend that you preview your work in browser from time to time. That gives you a look and feel of what your end work will be like. Now let us see our Firefox and let us see what we have. Now this is what we have when we preview in browser. If you take your cursor over the word paragraph, you can see that it is ready to be clicked. That tells us that our word paragraph has now been linked. It has now been converted to a link. Let us get rid of this and come back to what we were on before. Now, like we said, we want to look at the pseudo class selector, and we want the pseudo class selector to affect this word paragraph because it is a link. Like I said earlier, the pseudo class selector mostly apply to links. Now, we'll click on we'll highlight the word paragraph, go as usual to our CSS styles, the new CSS. It tells us that it's a compound CSS, and down here, instead of this, let's now just go down. Instead of this, let's go down and look for the word link, because what we want to do is create a CSS that will affect our links on this page. So let's just click on the word link and OK. Then our CSS definition box comes up. Let us give our links a font of Arial black, a font size of 14 for the purpose of this. Now it's okay to just toy around with all of this, for the purpose of learning. You can actually check the whole of this and try and find out what they do on your own. We might not have the time to cover the whole of this in our exercise, but while you are working, just fiddle with them and you get to learn that way. Now let's look at our line height. Okay, now let's just fiddle with the font style. Let's give it a font style of let's give it italic and let's apply it and see what we have. You can see that what we have specified here affects the link, and if we have any other link on this page, it is also affected. So that's it right now for our complex selectors. We have been able to see the application of the group selector. We have seen what the descendant selector does, and we have just looked at the pseudo class selector. Now these are the three complex selectors that we have. As we go on in the subject, we will discover the uses of all of this, and in creating our web page, all these things will come into application. Now let us move on to the next lesson. Thank you.